Good afternoon. Today we're going to learn how to solve absolute value equations. Hopefully you remember that absolute value shows up inside these two bars. Absolute value is distance from zero on a number line. Therefore, it's always positive. Let's do number one. The absolute value of x equals 10. So think about whether you were starting from school and you go in your car and you go 10 miles to the right and you wind up at positive 10. Or if you go 10 miles to the left and you end up at negative 10. So since absolute value is distance from zero and it's always positive, therefore x is either negative 10 or positive 10. The absolute value of z is 2/3, and so z is either negative 2/3 or it's positive 2/3. Absolute value of m equals negative 7. This is what no solution looks like. Absolute value is always positive, so we can't have it equaling a negative number. We're going to solve equations next. So up here, I'm going to put the steps to solving. Step number one is to isolate the absolute variable. Number 4 is done. This is what isolate the absolute variable looks like. Step number 2 is write two equations. We notice up here that absolute value, it either equaled negative 10 or positive 10. So either 2x minus 1 equals 5 or 2x minus 1 equals negative 5. Next step is you will do some algebra and solve. So add 1 to both sides, divide, x is 3, add 1 to both sides, divide, x is negative 2. The last step is that you always have to check your solutions. There are times when one of the solutions may not work. So I'm going to plug 3 in for x into my original equation and make sure it's a good answer. 2 times negative 3 minus 1 equals 5. Do the math inside the absolute value bars first. Subtract the numbers. The absolute value of 5 is 5. That is a true statement, so that's a good answer. X equals 3 is good. Now I'm going to check negative 2. Absolute value of 2 times negative 2 minus 1 equals 5. You have to multiply first, and then subtract. Absolute value of negative 5 is 5. 5 equals 5. That's a true equation, so negative 2 is also a good answer. Number 5. We have to get the absolute value on one side all by itself. So I'm going to add 5 over to the other side. I have the absolute value of a minus 4 equals 5. Now that it's isolated, I can go on to the next step, which is write two equations. A minus 4 equals 5. And a minus 4 equals negative 5. Solve for your variable. So a is 9. and a is -1. You have to plug it in and check your answers first. So I have the absolute value of 9 minus 4 minus 5 equals 0. Do the absolute value first. The absolute value of 5 is 5. 5 minus 5 equals 0. That's a true equation. So 9 is a good answer. Now we're on A. Check A equals -1. So I have the absolute value of -1 minus 4. Do the absolute value math first, so that adds up to -5. Take the absolute value of -5, which is 5. 5 minus 5 is 0 is a true statement. So A equals -1 is also a good answer. Let's move on to a different kind of problem. So you have to get the absolute value on one side all by itself. In college, we did this thing called substitution. So instead of solving for it, let's just say that equals u. So u stands for the absolute value. So I'm going to rewrite this as 3u minus 1 equals 8. I'm going to do some algebra, and I'm going to solve for u as I normally would. So 3u equals 9. Divide. And u equals 3. So that is not my answer. That is what the absolute value is. So I'm going to put the absolute value back in here now. So this says 3 equals the absolute value of x plus 2. Now I have the absolute value isolated. From there, I can write my two equations. So x plus 2 equals 3, and x plus 2 equals -3. Solve for x, so x equals 1, and x equals -5. Let's check and see if those are good answers. So we're going to check x equals 1 first. So I have 3 times the absolute value of 1 plus 2 minus 1 equals 8. 2 plus 1 is 3. Take the absolute value of 3, which is 3. Multiply, so I get 9 minus 1 equals 8. That is a true statement. So x equals 1 is a good answer. Now check -5. 3 times the absolute value of -5 plus 2. Do the math inside the absolute value. Take the absolute value of -3, which is +3. 9 minus 1 equals 8. That's a true statement. So -5 is also a good answer. Next example. So I have the absolute value. It is isolated. The absolute value equals 4x plus 5. So I need to write my two equations. So 3x plus 2 equals 4x plus 5. But the absolute value, so 3x plus 2, also equals the negative version. So what's different about this one is that when it equals the negative of it, since there's two terms on this side of the equal sign, this negative here, you have to remember that it's going to need to be distributed, and so it's going to change both of these signs. Let's finish the first one off. So we're going to do some algebra and solve for x. So I'm going to subtract the 3x over to one side. Subtract the 5. So x equals negative 3. Move over to the next one and distribute your negative. Now let's solve for x. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. I'm going to subtract the 2 over to the other side. That's a 7. I'm going to divide, and x equals negative 1. Now I need to check. So I'm going to plug negative 3 in for x. You need to remember to plug it into both places. So the absolute value of 3 times negative 3 plus 2 equals 4 times negative 3 plus 5. In the absolute value bars, you're going to have to multiply first. Negative 9 plus 2 is the absolute value of negative 7. Negative 12 plus 5 equals negative 7. The absolute value of negative 7 is positive 7. So that is a false statement. So x equals negative 3 is not one of my answers. It is what we would call extraneous. That is one of your extraneous solutions. Let's plug negative 1 in and see if it's a good answer. So 3 times negative 1 plus 2 equals 4 times negative 1 plus 5. Multiply first inside the absolute value bars. And multiply that 4 times negative 1. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. The absolute value of negative 1 is 1. And that is a true statement. So x equals negative 1 is my good only answer. And negative 8. The absolute value equals negative 1. So it is already isolated, but absolute value is always positive. It cannot equal a negative number. This is what no solution looks like. Go do your homework now.